Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Vedic Astrology Podcast. My name is Fiona Marks. It's time once again to have a look at the entry of the sun into another zodiac sign. It's time for Aries solar month because right around now, the 19th, 20th, 21st of March, wherever you are on the planet, the sun is entering into Aries. And my idea with these podcast episodes about each solar month is to give us a working awareness of the planets that are moving around and what are the main things that's happening. However, Aries, this particular one in 2024, there is so much going on. There's a lot to cover. Are you ready to have a Saturn and Mars conjunction in Pisces, the 12th sign, to have a solar eclipse in the dynamic sign of Aries? For all of the planets to be in a very tight space from our perspective here on Earth, all in a tiny quadrant of the zodiac. If not, this might be the podcast to listen to, a primer for everything that's going on this solar month of Aries and diving into each ascendant, seeing what it means to have the sun exalted in Aries for each ascendant, and a little tiny taste of perhaps what is going on with the eclipse for each ascendant. So this is the podcast to listen to if you want to find out what is going on in the solar month of Aries, March to April 2024. We're going to have a look at the lay of the chart when the sun enters Aries, and we'll have a look at the major things that happen during the solar month of Aries. And there is the planner for you available to download as well. So let's familiarize ourselves with the chart as it is when the sun enters Aries. Now, as we said, this could be between the 19th and the 20th and even almost the 21st if you're in New Zealand, Australia. So have a look at your own software to find out exactly where it will happen in your part of the world. Here on screen, for example, is my location, close to my location, Oeiras, near Lisbon in Portugal. And you can see that I have put in here the 20th of March and the sun is at 0 degrees, but it's actually at 21 minutes. So let's have a little play with how you would adjust your software. If you have Kala software, you can bring up this little change the birth time from the tools menu. And then we just want to play with getting that sun to exactly 0. Mine is ahead of 0 at the moment, so I want to take off some time. Let's be bold and take off an hour. That takes me back to 0 degrees, 18 minutes. Keep doing that until I get to 0, 0, 0, 0. And then I can move down to smaller increments, 10 minutes. And now I've hit 0, 0, 0, 0. But I cannot be sure that is exactly 0. So I need to bring up another screen on Kala, which is a right click. And then on the far right-hand column in the pop-out, there's a planetary information table. I can see that the sun is at 0, 0, 0, 0, 46 seconds. I can just keep off taking off minutes until I see the sun go to in Pisces. There we are, 29:59, and now I can just press 1 minute. Of course, you could play with the seconds to get it to 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And what that will show you is the lay of the planets. That's what we're going to discuss. But if you take the time to do it for your location, it will tell you where the ascendant is for your location on planet Earth. And that could be any one of the 12 available zodiac signs. In my case here in Lisbon, it's going to be a Capricorn rising chart for when the sun enters Aries and begins the tropical year again. And you can use that chart that you create for your location to tell you a little something about how this tropical year might work out in your part of the world. For example, if it was mine, we can see that I have a Capricorn rising for this chart, which means that the sun is happening in the 4th house of this chart. And it is an exalted 8th lord. So we might start thinking about some dynamic changes to the home. And actually, I have only just pulled up this chart as I'm speaking to you, so I'm entirely off the cuff here, but we just had a general election just over a week ago, and there is going to be a change of government, and it will be the current government has been in for 3 terms. So this will be quite some period of time since we've had a change of government. So maybe that is a dramatic and unexpected change in the home. Let's see. But for you, wherever you are in the world, that ascendant will be in a particular sign. And then you can do what we just did, have a look at where the exalted sun is in that chart. You could also have a look at where the Lagna Lord is. So as a Capricorn ascendant, that belongs to Saturn, and Saturn is in Pisces, being helped out by a friend Venus. And this will perhaps tell you that in my part of the world, in Lisbon, perhaps there's going to be some call for adventure and courage, some exploring, some trial and error. So maybe that's what the new government is going to experience, or maybe that's what we're all going to experience as the new government finds its feet. Okay, so that was actually a little detour, because for those of us who are listening and not watching, what we do want to talk about is where the planets are. So if you are listening, just close your eyes, clear your mind, bring into your awareness, for example, a South Indian chart, and let's see where the planets are. So regardless of where your ascendant is and what part of the world you're in, the sun will be in Aries. That's the whole thing that makes this chart work, is if you get the sun at 0 degrees. And it tells you that this is the beginning of the tropical year. And as well as having the sun in Aries, we have Rahu and Mercury in Aries. So there are 3 planets all together in Aries. Right next door in Taurus, there is Jupiter. And then there are no planets in Gemini or Cancer. The moon is in Leo. No planets in Virgo. K2 is in Libra. And then there are no planets in Scorpio, Sagittarius, or Capricorn. However, in Aquarius, there is Mars, and in Pisces, there is Venus and Saturn. So this is the layout of the chart. And as we talked about when we visited the solar month of Pisces, you will notice that all of the planets are bunched together in Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. We just have the moon over there in Leo. But if we were to look at the solar system, all of the planets are around the sun at the moment. And that is only going to become more the case because actually Mars is moving quite quickly and will very soon be in Pisces. So all of the planets are going to come even closer together. So as we start this tropical month of Aries, it's good to notice that we have the sun is exalted and Venus is exalted. So 2 planets in the signs where they are most able to perform their gifts. The sun and Venus both exalted. And we don't have any planets in bad dignities. So in terms of reading this as a chart for the year, that's a nice place to begin. And we have 3 planets in fixed signs at the start of this solar month. We've got Jupiter in Taurus, we've got the moon in Leo, and we've got Mars in Aquarius. So 3 planets in fixed signs. We have 4 planets in cardinal signs or dynamic signs. We've got the Sun, Rahu, and Mercury in Aries, and we've got K2 in Libra. So 3 in fixed signs, 4 in cardinal signs. And we just have the 2 planets in mutable signs or mixed signs. That's Saturn and Venus in Pisces. And in a way, because everybody's bunched together, we don't have as many Rashi aspects as you might expect from a birth chart. So we do have Mars Rashi aspecting Aries, and we do have the moon also Rashi aspecting Aries, but it's everybody's clumped together. So this is the beginning of the month. And you might like to think about what it means to have the sun exalted. That's what always happens when we start the tropical year. The sun for everybody is our soul, perhaps a generic karaka for father or for authority figures or for government. And actually we have a lot of elections all over the world. We just talked about Portugal, but everybody's going to elections. So government, possibly, also the bones, and I guess intelligence and consistency from the sun. So those are all exalted. And the same Venus is exalted. We might think about beauty, women, harmony, that smoothness of relationships, and really understanding what we value. That's why Venus is exalted in Pisces, because it helps lead us to higher fulfillment when it's in Pisces. It uses that process of discernment and valuing the somatic intelligence of discernment in Pisces helps us on our path to higher fulfillment. We have a couple Lajatati Avashtas going on here, a couple of strong ones to point out. Once the sun has entered Aries and a node is there, then we know that Mercury is being shamed here in Aries. And there's a lot going on for Mercury, but there's often a lot going on for Mercury because it's so close to the sun. So it's being delighted by the sun, meaning that it feels, really important and like it's doing the best work with the sun, because the sun is the king and the soul. So when Mercury is with the sun, there is a sense of delight from being close to that great inspirational energy. However, there's also agitation from being close to the sun, which can lead us to unfairly compare ourselves to the sun and feel like frustrated that we're not as strong, inspiring, confident, central to everything as the sun. And then now with the node there, we also get Mercury being shamed, which can lead Mercury to perhaps lose its own sense of what it's trying to manifest and project manage. That's what Mercury's so good at. But because it's blinded by the sun and Rahu, it can end up doing what it thinks the sun wants rather than what it really knows is its job to do. And so it can feel ashamed that it's working really hard to implement something that it doesn't really even believe in. So a bit complicated for Mercury there, but Mercury is a planet that has a lot of practice in these situations. It might be able to ride that out. And right next door in Pisces, we continue to have starvation happening because any planet that is with Saturn gets starved. So Venus is a little starved there, even though it is exalted. It might be feeling like it just can't quite get that satisfaction that it's looking for. So this is the lay of the land at the start of the solar month of Aries. And we have the sun moving from Pisces. So it's spent 30 days in Pisces. And Pisces is a feminine, mutable sign. So it's that internalization of process improvement. So everything that the sun had learned on its journey through the zodiac in the previous 12 months integrated in Pisces in an internal way that can be hard to see from the outside or hard to access from the outside. And now we have the sun bursting through that water sign to fire sign barrier into a dynamic sign like Aries. And Aries, it's got a bit of a reputation of starting things and maybe heading off head first into situations. Aries is a cardinal sign, which means it is dynamic and is interested in change, stirring up things, creating newness. So we're getting some dynamism from there. It's a masculine sign, so masculine signs are also willing to make the first move. It's a fire sign, which fire, I guess it's Pitta as well. Both fire and Pitta are about change and transformation. The fire that cooks our food and transforms it, or the fire that smelts impure metals and turns something from the ground into a very pure and hard substance. So it's dynamic because it's a cardinal sign, it's a masculine sign, it's a fire sign, it's a Pitta sign. And on top of that, it's Rajasic as well. So just an enormous amount of impulse to do something, anything. And that's why we associate Aries with taking on the initiation of something, the beginning of something. And in the Northern Hemisphere, it is the beginning of spring. And in the Southern Hemisphere, it's the beginning of autumn. That means that the sun's rays are at 90 degrees on what is considered in the Northern Hemisphere to be the rising or upward motion of the sun, where the sun is now going to be claiming more of the daylight hours. So the days are going to be getting longer in the Northern Hemisphere after this point, after the 0 degrees. Every degree that the sun moves forward, the days are going to get longer in the Northern Hemisphere. In the Southern Hemisphere, the sun is downward, or the nighttime is claiming more of the hours. So every night after this in the Southern Hemisphere is getting longer, and the days are therefore getting shorter and shorter. So it is an equinox when sun moves into Aries. That's what I mean, that there's just so much going on with the sun moving into Aries. And we want to think about, why is the sun exalted here? And it's because it shares so many qualities with the space of Aries, as we just talked about. It's masculine. The sun's masculine, just like Aries is. The sun is associated with the element of fire, and Aries is associated with fire. The sun's associated with Pitta, and so is Aries. And the sun has that warrior archetype, just like Mars, who owns the sign of Aries. There's just a lot of snap. Everything clicks together here for the sun. And in a way, Rahu is only going to dynamize this situation more, right? Because Rahu is definitely pure Rahu is jump out of the plane and then check if you have a parachute later. So it's going to be calling out, woohoo, let's go. And Mercury there as well is Rajasic by nature too. So we've got 3 planets that are really on the front foot and ready to do an activity. Doesn't really matter what it is. And we've got them in a sign that is supporting those activities as well. That is why this is considered to be a very dynamic place. Normally Aries, but put these planets in there and it feels even more dynamic and action orientated. So we can take that forward as we think about what this solar month is all about. It's a good time for taking action, taking that zoom out view of what's happening. We can say that the major things like the sun being exalted and all of that means, then a Venus-Saturn conjunction that morphs into a Saturn-Mars conjunction while Venus joins the sun in Aries. Sprinkled on top of that, we have the nodes with our luminaries. So we're going to have a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse. But let's now get into the weeds and see how that changes day by day over Aries solar month. To have a look at our solar month in more detail, I've changed color screens and I'm now on the animated transit screen. And that brings us a circular chart, a Western style chart, which we read anti-clockwise. And we know that the 10th house would always be at the top of that circle. But if we are more comfortable, Carla always has the South Indian style chart in the bottom right-hand corner here. And we can just also right-click and bring the Rashi chart up as well to be displayed so that we can keep our mind on how the month started. You could have that as one of your mini menus over here as well. Okay, so then let's have a look at day by day what occurs in this solar month. So I'm changing my speed to daily, and here we are on the 20th. We have that Venus-Saturn conjunction. These guys are friends. Venus helps Saturn to see that everything has been worth it, which is good when it's in Pisces because Saturn is trying to integrate all the learning that it's had on its journey around the zodiac. So Venus delighting Saturn there. And around the 22nd of March, Venus and Saturn will be exactly conjunct, highlighting what we just talked about, a sense that even the suffering, even the hard lessons, they've all been worth it. So quite a nice conjunction in Pisces, a nice place to have that conjunction. And then right after that, the following day, on the 23rd of March, you can see that Mars now joins into Pisces. So that's one of the things that happens this month is that Mars changes signs right at the beginning of this solar month. And now we have Mars and Saturn in the same sign. And we have to remember that these 2 planets are our problem-solving planets. And Mars' way of solving problems is to directly deal and confront by taking action. So whatever the problem is, let's try to cut it off at the knees and destroy it. And Saturn's approach to problems is to endure them and to persist and realize that no matter what is happening, I can keep going. So they're two very different approaches to conflict. And now they're going to be both in the same sign in Pisces, a feminine sign, a mutable sign. And I think Pisces encourages us to integrate our learning. And here we seem to be given the opportunity to integrate our learning around how to deal with problems. So that is going to be a theme for the month. Then at the same time, of course, we must notice that Venus and Mars then are also in the same sign. That's often considered a passionate combination. There's a lot here going on in Pisces, which is unconscious to the person, to all of us. It's happening at that inner processing level. So perhaps a chance to process how we have approached conflicts and problems in our relationships with love is being supported by this particular conjunction. Of course, it matters what house it's happening for you, but just by sign, that's what's happening. Then the next thing to keep in mind, if you have a look at the moon, we said started in Leo. Couple of days, here we are, 3 days in, the moon is in Virgo. We know that the moon is going to line up with K2 on 25th, 26th, depending on where you are on the planet. The moon will experience a lunar eclipse. That is, the shadow of the Earth will be cast onto the lunar surface from our perspective on this full moon. And the moon will be in Libra at that time. And once again, we find that it is a cardinal sign. Libra is another dynamic sign, and it's an air sign. So maybe it's in some ways more dynamic or less stable. It's a Vata sign as well. So again, pulling on that theme of air. It's Rajasic, just like Aries. And it is from the Shudra class rather than the warrior class. So we are noticing here that the moon, which is our emotions, and maybe our personality, if we think of the sun being the soul and the moon being the personality, this lunar eclipse is happening in a sign that is dynamic, just like Aries, but perhaps even less stable in some ways than Aries. So our emotions may be searching for a strong anchor to hold on to. And it's beautiful to have the sun exalted because that's the natural anchor for the moon. And Venus is the owner of Libra and it's still exalted in Pisces. So if what we were saying about Mars and Saturn being in Pisces with Venus helping us to integrate how we deal with problems in our love relationships, perhaps this full moon lunar eclipse in Libra is also bringing Venus into this theme as well. And the moon is going to want to connect with others when it's in Libra. So going through this eclipse, we can either say is stimulating for that, or we might feel cut adrift for those moments of that eclipse. What we thought we knew that we could do perhaps is a little disrupted. That was happening around the 25th of March. Let's keep moving forward every day because the next thing that's going to happen is Venus is going to move into Aries. It'll just pass over Neptune and then it will arrive into Aries around the 5th of April. And then we'll have 4 planets in that sign of Aries. So even more stimulation. We notice that Venus and the Sun are enemies to each other. Venus has now entered also into this shame situations, just like Mercury was feeling it might be implementing a vision that it doesn't quite believe in. The Sun and Venus, when they're together, get into this mutual sacrifice situation where Venus feels like it should give up its desires for the greater good. The Sun feels like it should listen to everybody's opinion, sacrifice its inspiration and be more diplomatic. But of course, the Sun is the one in the stronger position here because it is exalted. So probably Venus is going to feel this more than the Sun. So maybe for Venus, a sense of, in order to start this great task, Aries is initiating things, I might need to sacrifice some of my inner desires or what I know it is that I want. So this is happening on the 5th of April. And very soon after that, as you can see, the moon is already in Pisces. And so on the 8th of April, we will then have the moon entering Aries as well. And so we're going to have a solar eclipse on the 8th of April involving Aries, because the sun and moon will be in Aries with a node, in this case Rahu, and Mercury and Venus are going to be there. So it's an enormous amount of planetary information in this incredibly dynamic sign of Aries. When we're thinking about our working memory for the month of Aries, there's a lot of dynamism and action, and everyone really clumped together. So at this point of the solar eclipse, we just have Saturn-Mars conjunction in Pisces, that whole bunch of planets in Aries, and then Jupiter in Taurus. So everybody, all the players are within those three signs. And we will go on to talk more about the eclipse, because we need to look at it from a bit more personalized. If we try to look at it at this level, there's a couple of resources we can go to. We can have a look at Bernadette Brady's The Eagle and the Lark book, where she helps us to understand what each eclipse is about. And this particular one, she talks about flashes of inspiration and inventiveness and a time to really capitalize on that, which seems to harmonize very well with it taking place in Aries. And maybe wanting to give priority to these new shoots inside the self, this impulse to action. Pay attention to that, even to the extent of perhaps withdrawing a little bit from relationships. And that seems to be backed up as well, doesn't it, by Venus coming in there and feeling like it has to sacrifice things. So maybe this eclipse is about prioritizing my impulse, what it is that I feel called to initiate. So that's been stimulated. And we can also look at what happened at the beginning of this eclipse in 15. To get my software to line up, I've got 27th of May, but other books have got other dates in May. So do with it what you will. For those of us listening, we have Jupiter in Aries, Venus, Rahu in Taurus, and Sun, Moon, Saturn, Mercury in Gemini. So remember that it just needs the sun and the moon to be close enough to that node to create the eclipse. They don't have to be in the same sign. And usually when we start an eclipse cycle and end an eclipse cycle, it's a very partial eclipse. So Sun, Moon, Saturn, Mercury in Gemini, and then no planets, just like we have at the moment, no planets around the eclipse. So Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, nothing. Scorpio is K2, and nothing in Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, until we get Mars in Pisces. So in some ways, there's a few similarities there, aren't there? That the eclipse is involving Sun and Moon and Rahu, and Venus is not that far behind. So it's a bit of a player as well, just like it is in the current eclipse. Jupiter is also on its own in the beginning eclipse of this cycle. It's on its own in Aries. In our eclipse that's happening this solar month, it's in Taurus by itself. And the other similarity is that the planets are all bunched together, all at one little quadrant of the zodiac. So that is certainly one of the highlights of this solar month, is that we have an eclipse. I would say that there's just so much emphasis on energizing this impulse to take action. At the time of this eclipse, we have Saturn and Mars conjunction behind the eclipse, if you want to say, or in the sign before. So in Pisces, got the eclipse in Aries, and Jupiter is in Taurus. So there's a lot of integrating in Pisces of these two very powerful planets, Saturn and Mars. Mars was in Pisces for the original eclipse. So perhaps something for us there, integrating our approaches to conflict. And then we have all of the dynamism of Aries, and Jupiter is the sign after. So it's in Taurus. And remember that Jupiter owns Pisces. All the planets are really crunched together in one part of the zodiac, but Jupiter is linking Pisces behind the eclipse and being placed in front of the eclipse. It's like the whole eclipse is bookended by something important about Jupiter. So some lovely geometry of this eclipse, and perhaps a time to focus on your impulse, even if that means taking a little time away from the other stimulations, the relationships that you have in the world. Now, this is happening on the 8th of April, but very soon after that, we have Saturn and Mars becoming exactly conjunct. That's the big conjunction of this solar month. Keep an eye out for the 10th of April. And then the very next day, the Sun and Mercury catch up to each other and they form a conjunction. And that takes care of the main events for the solar month of Aries. I was just checking when Venus and Mercury catch up with each other, but it's right at the end of Aries, beginning of Taurus. So that was our journey day by day through the solar month. You can see that by the end of the month, we have 5 planets in cardinal signs, active dynamic signs. We only have 1 planet in a fixed sign, and we have 3 planets in mutable, integrating kind of signs. So that's been the movement of the month. A lot of stimulation to the cardinal sign and also good amount of stimulation to integrating and process improvement. Now, if you would like to follow all of that movement, one of the ways that you can do it is look up an ephemeris, and we have one of those in the new version of Carla. It's one of my favorite features is this table that has the degrees and position of every planet every day of the week, including the outer planets. It also tells you the conjunctions. It tells you which planets change sign. It looks at retrograde, and it will give you the moon phases as well. It does this by month, whereas what we're looking at is the solar month, but this is the calendar month. So you might like to go have a look at the ephemeris in Carla, or you can get them online. Just look for ephemeris, or you can download the planner on Patreon for Aries solar month. Just like we did last month, we've got all the days of the week down the left-hand side, a space for you to write your notes, and then a space up here for you to write in your own planets. Because as Ryan shared with us when he came and talked about on the podcast what transits are the most important, the transits that are the most important are the ones that line up with your own planets in your own birth chart. And that's what no podcast can predict, because everybody's got their planets everywhere. So you write in your planets here, and then you can see all of the degrees where planets are, and you can make notes during the month or use it as a planner to decide when would be good times to do things. And your outer planets are here at the bottom. So let's have a look at how you might use that. As we said, you could write in here your own planetary placements. So let's imagine that this person had their sun at 17 degrees of Leo, moon in Capricorn at the bright half, and Virgo could be the position for Mercury, and you would fill this in. You would also fill in here your observations of what happens. Maybe you like to monitor your mood. Maybe you like to monitor your diet or your approach to being efficient with what it is that you achieve. So you would just write in here, and it will help you outline connections between what's going on with the planets and what's going on with your experience. Here, we can also highlight where, as we just did in our discussion, where are the places that planets are having interactions with each other. So I've highlighted everything that's around the 15-degree mark, because that is where Rahu and Ketu are. Jupiter is spending some time at 15 degrees. Venus is spending some time at 15 degrees. The Sun is obviously going to spend some time there. And so is Mars. And so is Venus gets to do 15 degrees again a second time during this month. So that highlights, for example, then if you had something at 15 degrees, you know that there's a lot of aspecting going on. And of course, here is that Mars and Saturn conjunction at 14 degrees of Pisces. You might like to put in here the habits that you want to monitor. For example, maybe you want to get up early and see how often during the month do you actually do that. Maybe you want to meditate every day. Maybe you want to eat more vegetables. Whatever your particular habits are for the day, you can monitor that with your observing of the planets. And you can just fill it in every time you get up early and meditate. Maybe you do that on the next day as well. and doing well all during the week, but then comes the weekend, you don't manage to do either of those, but you do eat vegetables because you have more time to prepare. Anyway, you get the gist. You monitor the habits that you want to increase. But if you've put your own planets in, then you can begin to really personalize this. So if we know that the sun is at Leo and it's at 17, we can just on our own planner highlight all of the places where 17 gets activated, knowing that might have some impact on our day. So that this is where you really begin to personalize it for yourself. And you could do that as well for other planets, or in this case, for the type of moon that you have. You can notice when is 4S going to be and pop that in there. Also, you can highlight here when these eclipses are taking place, and that might help you with your planning for the month too. So there's lots of ways that you can use this planner. It's a bit like an ephemeris, but integrated into a daily, monthly kind of reflection journal. So if you would like to, you can download that from Patreon, from Fiona Marks on Patreon. Okay, so we have taken a look through the solar month, and we can see that it's a very dynamic time because there's a lot of stimulation to the cardinal signs, especially the sign of Aries. And as if that wasn't going to be enough stimulation, there's this solar eclipse also taking place in that very sign right at the start of the tropical year. And I think that's something that as we look forward to this tropical year from March 2024 to March 2025, we can maybe say that there's destabilizing. There's a lot of motivations for change. And that's even underscored more by there being a solar eclipse right at the beginning of this tropical year in the sign where everything is just starting. So as we were saying, it's hard to predict for big swathes of the population what an eclipse might mean because we don't know what's going on in everybody's individual charts. But one of the ways to begin to understand it a little better is to just look at where it's happening in your charts. Let's take our chart that we were using for Aries solar month and convert it into the eclipse. So just like before, we're going to go edit the data. We know that the eclipse is happening on the 8th of April. And same thing, you can just adjust the time until you get that to an exact conjunction. And Carla can help us with that because it has an eclipse screen where it is showing the eclipse in our local time. Now, when we are looking at this eclipse, a couple of things to notice. One is that this is happening in the cardinal signs. So at the most basic level, if you have your ascendant in a cardinal sign, that is Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, this eclipse is happening on angles to your ascendant. So this whole period while Rahu and Ketu are in Libra and Aries, this is where the eclipses are perhaps more stimulating. So that's maybe a generic way to understand how the eclipse is going to impact each individual person's chart is, do they have an ascendant that is on a cardinal sign? And then the other thing that we can look at is just to notice, as we did when we did the summary, that everything is very close together. We really have a run of planets here. We have 2 planets before the eclipse, we have 5 planets in the eclipse, and then we have 1 planet after. All the planets that are being stimulated are in a consecutive run of houses and signs. So let us have our best attempt at looking at what does this mean for each ascendant. Let's imagine that we are looking at this eclipse for an Aries ascendant. The sun is exalted in the sign of Aries, which for an Aries ascendant is the 5th lord, is exalted in the 1st house. And this is a really nice combination. The 5th lord in the 1st house, they're both trinal numbers. The 1st house is also an angle, so it's activating trinal energy. And this helps us to make easy improvements in our life. we have that feeling of grace supporting the improvements that we want to make. And we might feel more fulfilled and have more understanding about life. We might feel that our personality is well supported, is glowing through this placement of the fifth lord. The whole month of Aries is exalted. We might help us with investments, and we might feel lucky. And remember that mantras are also associated with the fifth house. So if you are an Aries ascendant, the fifth lord is exalted all month. And what does this mean when we take it to have a look at the eclipse for an Aries ascendant? What we'll notice is the eclipse is taking place over the 12th house, the first house, and the second house. So we are perhaps letting go of conflict because all of those planets that deal with conflict are in the 12th house in Pisces. We've got a lot of planets in Aries asking us to go ahead, to start something. And we have Jupiter in an earth sign in the second house of resources. So while I would imagine this is quite turbulent for Aries ascendant, in a way, there's a lot of support as well to let go of those conflicts and to gain the resources that Jupiter's offering. If we move that ascendant along to Taurus, then we see that for Taurus ascendant, the sun is actually the fourth lord, and the fourth lord is being exalted in the 12th house all month for Taurus. This is a moksha combination, the fourth and the 12th, but with the intelligence of the sun, perhaps stimulating an impulse around being charitable, caring deeply for others, perhaps loving living in a foreign land, and giving us transcendent emotions, but at the same time, seeing the world for what it really is. Having the fourth lord exalted in the 12th house all month for Taurus ascendants. If we look at the eclipse specifically, it's happening in the 12th house, and the planets in Pisces are in the 11th house, the eclipse is in the 12th house, and Jupiter is in the first house. So perhaps this feels a little around resources, maybe because we have the 11th house being stimulated here and the 12th house as well. So perhaps some encouragement to, like, a calling to be selfless and let go of these gains that we have in the 11th house, and a calling for this charity, the 12th house. And Jupiter there is ruling another moksha house, the 8th house. So perhaps a calling to be selfless for Taurus ascendants. If we look at this solar month through the eyes of a Gemini ascendant, it is the third lord, the sun, the third lord is exalted in the 11th. This brings together this of financial gains through innovation and our own efforts, having many friends and doing lots of networking, getting involved in side projects that produce cash flow with siblings or peers maybe, and helping to inspire others to fulfill their dreams. So the sun is exalted for everybody, but for each ascendant, it's a slightly different flavor. That's a Gemini ascendant. The eclipse is going to be taking place over the 10, 11, 12 for Gemini ascendant, the eclipse itself in the 11th. And perhaps this is giving people a chance to integrate conflict from their work because Mars and Saturn are in the 10th house. And then in the 11th house is where the eclipse is taking place. So Aries giving us the initiative to take action towards our gain and maybe letting go of business partnerships because Jupiter rules the 7th and the 10th and it's in the 12th. So perhaps stepping away from a career and starting something with passive income, being as the 11th house rules passive income. We look at this chart as if it was a Cancer ascendant. We then have the sun in Aries being the second lord exalted in the 10th house. So excellent for our reputation, understanding what it takes to make money and to do it. And also the second lord of the voice. So it's a powerful and inspiring voice during this solar month of Aries. The eclipse itself is taking place over the 9th, 10th, and 11th sign, with the 10th house being where the eclipse actually takes place. Maybe resolving conflicts around meaningful work, ending a cycle, perhaps innovatively shoring up your nest egg to allow this person to pursue a meaningful career, especially if their current career is a bit of a golden cage, then perhaps this eclipse allows the person to really evaluate what is meaningful for them and make those bold steps towards a change in career to something more meaningful. For a Leo ascendant, it is the ascendant lord that is exalted in the 9th house all month. Another very graceful combination, understanding one's proper role philosophically, a real sense of meaning, ethical, wise, inspired life. Again, could possibly stimulate charity, very virtuous, good teaching energy, and also lucky, having the trine activated by the ascendant lord that's also ruling an angle. So a lovely combination for Leo ascendant. The eclipse would be taking place in that 8, 9, 10 part of the houses, with the main eclipse happening in the 9th house. Taking initiative for meaningful work and contribution. Maybe this is a way to resolve obstacles in relationships and to apply yourself to a change in meaningful work. So the ascendant lord is in the 9th house with the ruler of the 10th house. So the eclipse is perhaps really stimulating this person to look for how to have a more meaningful contribution that they're making. If we look at this chart as a Virgo ascendant, then the sun is now the 12th lord in the 8th house. Another moksha combination. Mercury perhaps having a lot going on with this month. And when we think of 12 and 8 together, we might think of legal battles, the outcomes of legal battles. It's obviously a moksha combination, an excellent combination for contemplation and self-realization. Maybe making appropriate sacrifices for long-term health, long life, the 8th lord of longevity. And the 12th is also secret enemies. So maybe defeating secret enemies. That is the solar month for Virgo ascendant. And for the eclipse season, all of the planets will be in 7, 8, 9, the houses 7, 8, 9. So 7th is a relationship house. Really, 7, 8, 9 is the journey from relationships like boyfriend, girlfriends, through the 8th, the unknown transformation, into 9 is the marriage or the committed relationship. So this eclipse is taking place through that journey. An opportunity to reflect on the relationships and find meaning, and perhaps making changes to the financial union in the relationship, because we have in the eclipse itself, we have the 9th lord, the 10th lord, the 11th, the 12th, the 2nd, and that's all happening in the 8th. So a lot of financial numbers there for the Virgo ascendant. When we look at this chart as a Libra ascendant, we find that it is the 11th lord exalted in the 7th house. So there are great gains and partnerships through that combination of 11 and 7. Maybe shares the same dreams and desires as the partner. Excellent at inspiring and empowering other people. Helps others to find the most of their opportunities, and social involvement increases gains. Would be what we think about with the 11th lord in the 7th house. We know that the sun is actually debilitated in Libra. So this is the best place for Libra ascendant, is the sun being in the 7th house is what Libra ascendants can contribute to others. And here we have the eclipse taking place over 6, 7, 8, the house of 6, 7, 8. So a lot of support to moving forward in relationships, because it's all taking place, that eclipse, in the 7th house, with unexpected changes, perhaps helping to remove obstacles, because Jupiter rules obstacles for this person, and it's in the 8th house of unexpected changes. When we look at this chart for Scorpio ascendant, we find that it is the 10th lord. The sun is the 10th lord, and it's exalted in the 6th. This is a real Arthur combination, 2 Arthur houses. So work as service is going to be really a calling during this time, very inspiring service in medical field, legal fields, military, police, healing, nutrition, even working with animals, anywhere, even working with unions, anywhere where we can be of service. This is a great combination for working through a tough situation or a tough environment, perhaps giving us the inspiration to right some wrongs, standing by our own work, being a figurehead for service. And all of our efforts might be hard, but they're very fulfilling as well. So quite an inspiring, hardworking combination this month for Scorpio Ascendant. The eclipse will be taking place over 5, 6, 7, the houses 5, 6, 7, integrating how to improve based on self-effort, because we have the 1st, 3rd, 4th, and 6th lords all in that 5th house of Pisces. And then maybe the initiative in the 6th house here is to work for the greater good, to overcome obstacles. And Jupiter being in the 7th house is actually helping us with inspiring speech. So this might be an eclipse where the person wants to take action about a big problem and feels that they have the grace and the support to do that. If we look at it from Sagittarius Ascendant, the sun rules the 9th house and it's exalted in the 5th house, a very graceful combination, very guru kind of combination. Naturally inclined towards dharmic approaches, following one's purpose, does well with spiritual practices this month, also good for investments. An intelligent philosophical mind is being supported this month for all Sagittarius ascendants. The eclipse is happening over 4, 5, 6, and perhaps that's integrating how to make improvements in one's inner happiness. We've got those 2 conflict planets in the 4th house. An impulse towards the greater good from the 5th house. We've got a lot of planets, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. The lords are all in the 5th house of improvement. So how can we contribute to the greater good? And maybe all of this will give a feeling that inner happiness comes from confronting problems and improvements to inner happiness by facing obstacles, because Jupiter is in that 6th house and it's ruling the 1st and the 4th, our inner identity and happiness. When we look at this chart from a Capricorn ascendant, the sun is the 8th lord exalted in the 4th house. This is a moksha combination. We've got perhaps an intuition, and it's intelligent because it's the sun. So powerfully connecting with others emotionally, excellent at researching into this area of the 4th, inner stability and inner peace. That's the theme for the month. And then the eclipse is happening over 3, 4, 5, the houses 3, 4, 5. Maybe inner peace. They're going to be integrating, because the eclipse is happening in that house of inner peace. So integrating how to be courageous and stop worrying, maybe even making decisions about purchasing a home, because we know that the ascendant lord there is in the 3rd house just before this eclipse. And the eclipse is stimulating this 4th house of property and investment. And we know that Saturn will be moving into the 4th house for Capricorn ascendants in the coming years. So now is the time to have courage before Saturn goes into debilitation. And looking at the chart from an Aquarius ascendant, another Saturn ascendant, we have the 7th lord, the sun. The 7th lord is exalted in the 3rd, 2 karma houses here. Perhaps this is working well with contracts, negotiating contracts, short distance travels, or traveling with your partner. And maybe being encouraged to be adventurous by other people, dragging you into being more adventurous during this solar month. The eclipse is happening over the houses 2, 3, and 4. So examining how much we want to be responsible with having those 2 heavy conflict kind of planets in our 2nd house of responsibilities, examining how much we want to be responsible and how much to follow our own interests. That is the 3rd house where the eclipse is taking place, while not losing the stability of wealth. We've got Jupiter in the 4th house of abundance. So that might be what the person is being asked to consider during this eclipse. And then finally, we can look at this eclipse and this month from a Pisces ascendant. If you read the chart as a Pisces ascendant, then the sun is the sixth lord in the second house, another Arthur combination, hardworking, speaking about health, disease, nutrition, self-defense, speaking about obstacles, defeating enemies through speech, and successfully applying oneself to earn the money, to accumulate the money to meet our responsibilities, even perhaps overcoming debt. The sun exalted in the second house. And this means the eclipse is taking place over 1, 2, and 3, first, second, and third house, integrating conflicts around finances, as we have the lords of the 2nd, 9th, 11th, and 12th, all in that first house. So they're very financial, Mars and Saturn. Maybe integrating something about finances and the impulse to take responsibility and to contribute and to transact with others, stabilizing our effort and our self-effort and work there by having Jupiter in the third house. So this is what might be going on for each different ascendant. As we said, it depends very much on your own chart. So just looking at it, even by ascendants, is not enough to cut down to the fine detail of what might be going on. I hope that you have enjoyed an overview of what is going on in Aries solar month. As you can see, there's an awful lot happening, a lot of energy for change. When we think about what's going on in the world, it's something we might want to, as we step into Aries, take a deep breath and know that there could be a lot of turbulence with this current month, as we have so much going on in those dynamic signs. And we have both the lunar eclipse and the solar eclipse happening in dynamic signs. And then another thought to take away is the geometry of this eclipse, that it is all of the planets close together and Jupiter is bookending both sides of this eclipse. So have a think about what Jupiter does for your chart and see how that is holding the space for this dynamic eclipse. I wish you lots of good luck and wisdom as you go through this solar month of Aries. And please come along to Patreon to download the Ephemeris Planner if you would like to monitor your observations of what this solar month of Aries is like for you. Okay, great to be with you and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, everyone.